So earlier this year, we did a review on the 2020 Riese Müller Load 60, and this bike looks pretty similar, but it's a bit longer. So it's called the Load 75. This is the Riese Müller Load 75, and it's totally redone for 2020. Now, it's the 75 because the box here is 75 centimeters long, and the Load is identified as the full suspension front loader cargo bike from Riese Müller. Cargo bike can carry all sorts of stuff or loads or whatever you want to call it. This right now is set up to be able to carry 3 kids. Basically, if you remove the tray, you have the seat here and 2 seats here. But we see people carrying all sorts of stuff. Dogs, couple of dogs, single dog, whatever, works great for that. We often do videos, and Tara, our videographer, who's behind the camera right now, is often sitting up here. So some of these different tours that we do around cities and stuff like that, Tara will sit up here. So the Load 75 is available in 2 different colors. It's available in coal gray matte, which is this color. It's also available in white, which has a bit more gloss to it. Now, this bike's available in 1 frame size. I mean, aside from the bucket, you can get the bucket in the 60 centimeter version as well. But the great thing about it is it can fit all sorts of rider heights. I mean, we've seen this bike fit riders as short as 5'1", 5'2". Maybe if you got a longer inseam, you could even go a little bit shorter, and upwards of 6'5", 6'6", or potentially even taller with some other modifications like a different seat post and handlebars perhaps. Part of what makes it really adjustable is the seat tube. So the seat tube is angled backwards, so as it goes up, the seat actually gives you more room. So the saddle's pushed backwards, you have more room, especially for a taller rider. You might need that more so. But the handlebars are highly adjustable as well. So you have one adjustment that you can adjust the height of the handlebars by going up and down. You have this quick release lever and a little button, and you can push it into different positions. The higher up, you might have a more upright seating position and a little bit more of a relaxed ride. But if you go a little bit lower, if you're riding a little bit more forward, that's going to be a bit more sporty. Now you can adjust the height there, but you can also adjust the angle. You can do the angle adjustment by pulling these 2 quick release levers, and then there's a locking mechanism for safety. So that's the slightly more forward position, and then it can go 1 more step forward to the most sporty position, and that you're really going to be in this kind of racier, sporty position, a little bit more aerodynamic. Another really unique feature about the Load is its rear rack. Now, it's a suspended rear rack. This is something you usually don't find on a full suspension bike, but Riese Müller is unique in these sort of designs. Now, they started this using this style design with their Delight, but they also carried it over to the Load, as well as some of their other models like the Culture and Homage. But it's suspended, so any cargo that you put on this rear rack is suspended, as is the whole frame of the bike. Some other details, it has this really nice bibia strap, which is adjustable, great for like throwing a jacket or something small under here, but you can fit standard panniers on here really well, and that's something that I'll do quite often when I'm riding this bike. Now, this has a 20 kilogram or about 44 pound weight capacity, which is really fine. Anything more than that, you might impact the handling a little bit on the bike and the way that the suspension performs, so I think that that's quite fine. So one of the main things I really love about the Load is its full suspension, meaning it has suspension in the rear of the bike as well as the front. And that really gives a very comfortable ride, but on top of that, it gives a really stable ride. Makes it really easy to handle the bike, stay very firmly planted on the ground no matter what the terrain is. And I found I've been able to ride the bike on-road, off-road, off of curbs, through potholes, whatever, and not really worry about it and still feel very stable on the bike. I think this is really important, especially if you're carrying a lot of cargo. And many people are carrying probably some of their most precious cargo, as you might call it, their kids, you know. So having suspension in that way really increases the safety, and that's something to consider. But on top of that, I just really like the ability to have cargo capacity. I use my bike more than I use my car, so having the ability to go to the grocery store or just go run some errands. I've carried everything from an air conditioner to several cases of beer, to whatever. There's all sorts of scenarios that I've put in there. Now, diving into the details on the bike, I like to start with the tires. Now, this has the Schwalbe Big Bend Plus, which I think is a really great spec for this bike. It's 20-inch by 2.15, so it's a nice good width to the tire, and it's a Big Bend Plus. The plus means that it has extra puncture protection, which is really important for this sort of application. I think you don't really want to be fussing with flat tires on a bike like this. But if you see, actually, even with the stand up, it's pretty easy to get the wheel off. But really good puncture protection, good tread to it. So this is a tire that will handle well on road as well as some light off-road. If you wanted to ride on some rougher terrain, they do have another option. It's called the GX option, and that will come spec'd with a knobbier tire. So that's another option if you wanted to do more off-roading, but most people usually stick with the standard tires. Now you have a reflective sidewall. It's a balloon tire, so you can run it at lower pressure. I mean, the bike has suspension, but if you wanted to increase the comfort even more, you could actually lower the pressure on the tire, so that's also an option. And it's a through axle fork on here. So this is a Suntour XCM through axle fork. It's a coil spring, so really low maintenance, performs well, and it's pretty versatile. One of the things with the coil spring fork is that it kind of adapts a little bit more to the weight because the way that the spring performs is comparison to air. So I think that's a good spec for this bike, and we've been working with bikes with this fork on it for a couple years now, and been really happy with it. For the rear shock on the bike, we have the X Fusion coil spring shock, and it's really great because it's very low maintenance and you really don't have to fuss with it much at all. If you're a very heavy rider, you might find that you want to swap this for a heavier spring, but I find that most people really have no trouble with the standard setup on here. So this particular model is called the Load 75 Vario HS. And it's Vario, that means it comes with the NVOLO continually variable transmission, which for this version is always going to be paired with the belt. You also see the belt on the Rohloff E14 version, which is a new option for 2020. Previously, it was only the NVOLO and the Touring version available. Now the Touring is another option that's kind of the going to be the lowest price point, but it's also going to be a bit higher maintenance, not have the same feature of the belt. So the Touring version would be having a derailleur and a cassette like you'd find on most kind of sport style bicycles. I'm a big fan of having a belt. It's much lower maintenance, you don't have to worry about grease, and really simple to operate. So the continually variable transmission on this bike, it means that it doesn't have any specific indexes to it. So on a traditional derailleur, you might have 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or up to 13 these days, specific indexes on the gears. But the way that this works is you just kind of twist the shifter, and it will allow you to really adjust in a finite way what gear you want to be in, and really optimize your specific cadence. So I find that that works really well. The Rohloff hub is another option. That's going to be the widest range of gears at 526%, and that's going to use electronic shifting, and you shift the gears individually by pushing a button, or if you hold the button you can actually shift 3 at a time, which is a really nice option as well. So depending on your use scenario, you might pick one or the other. I think that the Touring version is going to be the sportiest, the lightest weight, maybe the most familiar for people to work with. The NVOLO, in my experience, is really one of the easiest to operate, but not as efficient as the derailleur or the Rohloff hubs. But the Rohloff hub, the main benefit, you have the widest range of gears, and you're going to have that electronic shifting, so you don't have any cables to fuss with or whatever else, which those things do tend to add to the needed maintenance over time. The Rohloff, really once a year you change the oil pretty much and you're good to go. So we have some different videos talking about those different drivetrain options, but I just wanted to, give you a little bit of a synopsis on what's available for this bike specifically. So as with the Load 60, the motor has been completely replaced for 2020. Now this is going to use the Generation 4 Bosch motor. Now this one in particular, because it's the HS, it has the high-speed motor. The standard motor on the Load is going to be the CX motor. That motor has a 20 mile an hour top speed, where the high speed has a 28 mile an hour top speed. One of the nice details about this new motor is it has the same amount of torque as the CX version, so 75 Newton meters on both motors, really plenty of power. Now this is specifically the Cargoline version, but it is actually possible to change the programming to make it specifically the speed version, just standard speed Generation 4 motor, or the CX Generation 4, which is really my preference. The Cargoline motor is really designed to carry very heavy loads, and it performs well under those circumstances, but I find that most people are not really carrying that much, and they might find that the traditional programming of those Generation 4 motors will work better. So for us, it's kind of the default that we're encouraging people to switch to that standard speed or CX programming, because I think you'll find that the performance on it is much nicer. Some other details, just looking at the motor, you'll see it has this larger chainring. Previous versions had a smaller chainring because inside the motor they used a reduction gear, and the chainring actually rotated 2.5 times for every crank revolution, where this is a 1-to-1 relationship. That also means that this motor operates much easier when the power is off or when operating beyond the assist level, because there's no extra gears for you to pedal through as you're riding. You don't actually have any resistance in the motor, so that's a really nice feature. Some other little details, you'll notice this little sprung action tensioner here on the belt, and this allows them to put a belt on a full suspension bike, which is really not so common. But I want to show a little bit more about the motor, so let's check it out from the other side. So this, as you see, is the Cargoline Speed, but it's the same hardware as the traditional Generation 4 Bosch Performance Line Speed motor, but it just has different programming and a different cover on it. But as I said, I think I personally would change that to the standard Performance Line Speed programming. But you'll notice that it's really quite small. They've made the size of the motor much smaller, the weight of it's smaller, and on top of that, they improved the performance, which is pretty awesome. Now, I should just note the way that these motors work. They use a technology called pedal assist, which basically means that you pedal the bike and it provides assistance. So as you pedal, it amplifies your pedaling. Now you can ride it with no assistance, just like a normal bike, or you can ride 50% assistance, upwards of 340% assistance at the top levels, and that's pretty significant. Now I should note that in the Cargoline specific version, they do say that the top level of assistance goes up to 400%, but you're really only going to see that power if you have a very heavy load in the bike. That's why I kind of prefer the standard programming. In order to activate the assistance, the motor uses 3 different sensors. So it uses one sensor that senses how fast you're pedaling, another senses how hard you're pedaling, and then on the rear wheel, they sense how fast the bike is going overall. Based on all this information, the motor takes 1,000 senses per second, and it's able to provide a really seamless experience. And I found that the Bosch motor system is really the best in the market. Now this bike comes standard with one single Bosch PowerPack 500 battery, which is 500 watt hours, and it's a 36 volt, 13.6 amp hours. And that single battery generally on average might get you around 25 miles or so, but this one happens to have the second optional battery here. To charge the batteries, you can charge it on the bike or off the bike. To charge the battery on the bike, you could open this little port here, but if you wanted to charge it off the bike, it has the same style port on the underside, and they're locked on the bike using the same key. So you have the same key for both the batteries as well as the rear frame lock, which is really nice. So for 2020, there's been some updates to the motor as well as the drivetrain, but the box has some nice updates as well, mainly these rear seats. Previously, they were both fixed to the back plate here, but now we have this option to remove the seats, and you can really adjust them as well. To adjust them, you have this little lever. Now you can raise the seat up like this by opening this quick release, but you can also totally change the position. And to do so, you just kind of remove this lever here, basically raise this all the way up, and inside here you have a little kind of lever you got to push in order to remove the seat. So as you see, you just kind of push this together. That allows you to remove the seat out fully. Now if you wanted to put the seat in the other position, you can just set it up here and insert it. This will allow the child to sit in a much more relaxed position, and we just reinsert this little quick release lever in the back. This would be really great if you wanted your child maybe to go to sleep, as they might often do on a bike like this. And I'm going to put the seat back in position and show the rest of the functions of the box. Now, similar to last year's version, we do have this front tray available when you get the low sidewalls. Now this is really great if you want the two kids that are sitting in the back to be able to maybe eat on or just use for playing, whatever you might like. But you can easily remove it just by pushing these little plastic clips here, push it up, and then this bike actually has the third seat installed. And in order to utilize the third seat, we're going to open what's called the footwell. And basically you're just going to pull this up. Now you might have heard that little click, and actually the way it clicks into place, it just uses these little nubs here. And we're just going to push this down, and there's actually a similar little screw with the insert, and we're going to clip it in place right here. So you have the bottom seat belt here with the other parts of the harness here, so you can strap a kid in. I would say generally speaking, you're probably going to want the tallest child to sit in this position, just because you don't have any limitations with the handlebar as you might have in the rear seat position. So for now, I'm going to leave the footwell open and just put this tray back in place. I should note that you won't really be able to carry a kid there, but it is nice to have that option. Now, one other thing I should note about this tray, it is set up actually to be able to carry a baby seat, so like a car seat, for example, where the car seat actually sits in here and then you use straps on either side. Now, I should note that not all places it's actually legal to carry a kid that might fit in a car seat, because some places is required, like New York, for example, a kid needs to be at least 1 year old in order to sit inside of a bicycle. Now, this bike's set up with the standard Intuvia display, but you do also have an option for what's called the smartphone hub. This is a new display option for 2020, and it's also retrofittable to other bikes, so something you might want to consider. But we'll go through the details on the Intuvia display. To turn it on, you just hit the power button right here. By default, it's going to be in off mode, meaning no assistance. As we go up through the different assistance levels, it's going to change the percentage of assistance, and it's also going to change the amount of power that you use. You can also note that the range down here is going to change as I cycle through the assist levels. So the first mode is 60%, Tour is 140%, Sport mode is 240%, and Turbo is 340%. At that point, you really have to work very little to get the bike going pretty fast. Now you see that range updating each time. Now this will also change depending on how you're riding the bike, how efficiently, all sorts of terrain, how much weight you're carrying, etc. The battery life will show up right here. I suspect that it's a little bit less than 2 bars, but that's one of the challenges with this display, is it's not as detailed as some of the other displays like the smartphone hub or the kiosks, for example. You'll see the speedometer here in miles per hour. You can change that to kilometers if that's what you want or need. And then the light indicator. Now, because this is a speed bike, the lights are going to be switched on all the time, but you can alternatively make it switchable. But the challenge there is you have brake lights, which you probably wouldn't want to have switched off. So we recommend that you just leave it on all the time, and it's an added safety feature. To see some of the additional details on the display, you're going to hit the I button. You could hit it here, or you can also hit it right here. So I'm going to just hit the I button. You see the odometer, trip distance, clock, max speed, average speed, trip time. You can see the life of the individual batteries, and then back to the range. Now, one other detail I wanted to show you on the display specifically is walk assist. Now, to activate walk assist, you have a button on the top of the thumb pad. You tap that button and then you hold the plus button. While holding the plus button, it's going to activate the walk assist and propel the bike forward. It's really great if the bike's loaded up and you're walking through a crowded area, or if you have to walk the bike up a hill. So while we're up on the handlebars, I wanted to go over some of the safety features which are available on this bike. Now, this is the high-speed bike, so it's going to come standard with the mirror. It's also going to come standard with the horn. The horn is really loud, so I'm just going to beep it real quickly. Hopefully nobody gets upset at me. And then we have the light. So it has the Supernova M99 Pro headlight, which has a high beam and low beam. If I hit the button here, it'll activate the high beam and low beam. And then we have the Tektro Auriga brakes that also are hooked up with the brake light. And up front we have the Tektro Auriga E-Comp caliper, dual piston with a 180 millimeter rotor in the front and the same calipers with a 203 rotor in the rear. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know we covered a lot. I hope that it kind of helps explain the bike, because it is a bit complex, but riding it is pretty simple, which is nice. But if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments below, or just reach out. I have a lot of experience, as does most of my team, because we work with these bikes quite a bit. So we're always happy to help. But I look forward to seeing you in future videos, and we'll see you soon.